So in this video, we're going to look at the book of Song of Solomon, and it is the last book in the section of scripture known as wisdom literature. Song of Solomon is considered love poetry, so it's a poem, so you can't just read it and like you would Genesis, which is recounting events and people and things like that. So it is definitely poetry more so than some of the other wisdom literature that we've discussed. So let's jump in and let's answer our 8 questions. So when we think about who wrote Song of Solomon, it's pretty obvious that Solomon did because he identifies himself right off the bat in chapter 1, verse 1. He says the Song of Songs, which is Solomon. And then he launches into the love poetry. When we think about who it was written to, I believe it was written to married couples, husband and wives. It's kind of like a handbook on marriage. When we think about how much time is covered, that's going to be something that we can't answer because it is poetry, so you can't really put a time frame on the poetry. The main idea of the book, I'm going to submit this to you, that it educates men and women how to live happily in a marriage relationship. It's kind of like a handbook on marriage. The notable characters in the book are Solomon and his love. He never names the woman. He just calls her my love, my beloved. So we don't know who she was. When we think about notable events, I didn't come up with this. I did a Bible study through a website called Come Fill Your Cup, and it was for women only. I don't know if it's still available. You would have to look online and see. But it was very helpful for me to understand the book. And this is what they submitted as events within the book. So chapter 1 through chapter 3, verse 5, is about the dating relationship between Solomon and his love. Then chapter 3, verse 6 through chapter 5, verse 1 is the wedding itself and the wedding night. And then chapter 5, verse 2 through the end of the book is events that took place after their wedding. So when we think about where on the timeline, it was definitely during the United Kingdom. Now, when we think about Jesus, there's some disagreement here. Some people hold to the belief that Song of Solomon is just represents Jesus and the church. Because if you look in Ephesians 5:22 through 32, it likens the church to be the bride of Christ. Now, I believe that. I believe that's true, and I believe the Bible teaches that. But based on my study, I don't believe that's what Song of Solomon is talking about. And that kind of the idea that Song of Solomon, represents Jesus and the church is found in some songs, some old hymns that you may have heard of. Jesus, Rose of Sharon. And I have found a friend in Jesus has the line of he's the lily of the valley. And both of those phrases come from Song of Solomon. So you can see how that thought kind of permeated some people as they wrote hymns. And even today you may hear people that hold to that belief. I'm not going to be dogmatic about it and say that I know for sure that it's not talking about Jesus and the church, that it is a handbook on marriage, but just based on my study, that's what I believe. So I would encourage you to read it for yourself, and you're probably going to have to study it. You're going to have to get some commentaries and do some digging, because like I said, with it being poetry, just a casual reading, to me it was really difficult to know what was going on. You may be a little smarter than me when it comes to poetry. I'm more of a literal person, do better with literal things instead of poems. Poems was never really my something that I was drawn to when it comes to reading. And still today, I don't pick up a book of poetry and just read it for fun. So when we think about why to study the book of Song of Solomon, like I said, God really shows us, I believe, based on my study, that every married couple should enjoy a wide range of sexual pleasure with the one that they're married to. And just I did come to understand this when I was doing the Bible study that I mentioned, that anytime when you're reading the book of Song of Solomon, you run across apple tree, raisin. That's an idiom for sex or a sexual act, and that's going to help you a little bit to understand where I'm coming from. Like I said, but you may study and come to a totally different conclusion. And I believe it shows the beautiness and happiness and power of faithful love between a man and a woman when they're married. Now there are some two times that it gives advice to people that are not married. It's found in chapter 2, verse 7, and chapter 3, verse 5. It reads, "Do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases or until it's time." So that's a way of saying wait until marriage. There's a place and a time for these sexual acts, and that is inside marriage, and it says that 2 times. And another way of saying that would be to pursue romance and sexual intimacy at the right time and in the right way. So I hope this has been helpful. It's a very different book. A lot of people are really shocked when they find that this kind of stuff is in the Bible. But again, it's poetry. It may take a little bit of studying and digging to really be able to comprehend it in the right way. But I would encourage you to just read it and see what you can come up with. But it may take some studying and some digging. And I'd love to hear back from some of you guys to see if you came up with what conclusions you drew after you read and studied Song of Solomon. So next week we will jump into what's considered the section of Scripture known as major prophets.